Hi guys! Welcome back to my channel Fiction Addiction. My name's Barish Krimsh. Today I am going to talking about Isaac Newton's mystery. A genius with dark secrets. Did Newton really burn the majority of his works? Isaac Newton changed the way we understand the universe. Revered in his own lifetime, he discovered the laws of gravity and motion and invented calculus. He helped to shape our rational worldview. But Newton's story is also one of a monstrous ego who believed that he alone was able to understand God's creation. His private life was far from rational, consumed by petty jealousies, bitter rivalries and a ruthless quest for reputation. In 1727, just weeks before his death, Isaac Newton burned volumes of his own manuscripts. What did those papers contain? After spending much of his life studying the ancient art of alchemy, the codes of the Bible, and trying to predict the apocalypse, did he discover something the world was not prepared to face? Modern psychiatrists suggest that this act, along with other strange behaviors, was caused by a sickness that not only made him paranoid and obsessive, but also explained his genius. When Sir Isaac Newton died, he left behind no will and an enormous stack of papers. His surviving correspondences, notes, and manuscripts contain an estimated 10 million words, enough to fill up roughly 150 novel-length books. There are pages upon pages of scientific and mathematical brilliance. But there are also pages that reveal another side of Newton, a side his descendants tried to keep hidden from the public. Even in his lifetime, Newton was hailed as an eminent scientist and mathematician of unparalleled genius. But Newton also studied alchemy and religion. He wrote a forensic analysis of the Bible in an effort to decode divine prophecies. He held unorthodox religious views, rejecting the doctrine of the Holy Trinity. After his death, Newton's heir, John Conduit, the husband of his half-niece Catherine Barton, feared that one of the fathers of the Enlightenment would be revealed as an obsessive her. After his death, Newton's heir, John Conduit, the husband of his half-niece Catherine Barton, feared that one of the fathers of the Enlightenment would be revealed as an obsessive heretic. And so for hundreds of years few people saw his work. It was only in the 1960s that some of Newton's papers were widely published. On the contrary, Newton seems to have preserved most of what he wrote on mathematics, physics, history, theology, and chemistry, alchemy, as well as his official and personal correspondence. This has caused headaches for later scholars interested in his life and work, due to the enormous mass of unorganized and often undated material amounting in all to maybe 10 million words that Newton left behind and which were scattered after his death. The vast work of classifying, transcribing, and translating and editing the writings by Newton that have survived is currently being carried out by the Newton Project, now based at the University of Oxford. Many of Newton's manuscripts are working notes in which he copied out and collated material from various sources. In the case of alchemy, in which the sources were often anonymous and unpublished letters, this has caused scholars in the past to attribute to Newton ideas that he was merely transcribing. There are two possible sources that I can think of for what you heard about Newton burning most of his works. One of Newton's heirs mentioned that Newton had burned some of his papers a few weeks before his death in 1727. He gave no indication of what those papers were, but it seems unlikely that they could have contained anything that Newton regarded as significant to his scholarship, given all that he preserved, including manuscripts reflecting his heretical religious views. In all likelihood what Newton burned were old papers connected to this bureaucratic duties at the Royal Mint. On a previous occasion he is known to have burned boxfuls of papers accumulated during his prosecution of counterfeiters and coin clippers. About this, see Sarah Dry's recent book The Newton Papers, The Strange and True Odyssey of Isaac Newton's Manuscripts. Something else to bear in mind is that, throughout most of his career, Newton was very loath to publish, due to a combination of his high intellectual standards and his aversion to the public controversies that publishing original ideas inevitably attracted. He famously wrote in a letter to his friend Haley that philosophy is such an impertinently litigious lady that a man had as good be engaged in lawsuits as have to do with her. This attitude is reflected in the fact that Newton's revolutionary mathematical discoveries about the infinitesimal calculus circulated only in private letters. Newton's masterwork, the Principia, would probably never have been published if not for Haley's good offices and financial support. Of Newton's long years of chemical experiments and reflections, all that he gave to the public were a few paragraphs of his views on the microscopic structure of matter and a brief essay on the nature of ACI. Of Newton's long years of chemical experiments and reflections, all that he gave to the public were a few paragraphs of his views on the microscopic structure of matter and a brief essay on the nature of acids. Of Newton's long years of chemical experiments and reflections, all that he gave to the public were a few paragraphs of his views on the microscopic structure of matter and a brief essay on the nature of acids. Newton's extensive investigations into the chronology of human civilizations were published only after his death. But the papers that Newton left after his death do not bear out the idea that he might have made any significant discoveries beyond those on which his well-earned fame rests. Sir Isaac Newton had a Pomeranian named Diamond who he referred to as the constant but incurious attendant of his master's researches. Newton doted on his little dog and rumour has it that Diamond was a wee bit spoiled. Stanley Coren's book, The Pawprints of History, says,
"This story was told in a letter that Newton wrote to explain why his publication of the treatise that contained his law of gravity would be delayed. Newton was working on the final revisions, he was making significant progress and was feeling quite good about the work. He had worked all day, and when the sun went down needed to light some candles to continue with his calculations. As usual, Diamond was sleeping nearby. A knock on the door called Newton out of the room, and apparently Diamond awakened to the sound of talking, which included voices that were unfamiliar to her. Her protective instincts were immediately aroused, and she tried to get to her master. Unfortunately, Newton had closed the door to his study, so she was reduced to running wildly around the room, barking in excitement. On one circuit of the room, Diamond apparently collided with the leg of Newton's small writing table, and the shock of her collision caused the burning candle to tip over, directly onto the manuscript. In the resulting fire there was actually little damage to the room, but the manuscript that Newton was working on was completely destroyed.
Newton may not burn any of his works. He is too pedantic and paranoid for that. What we regard him to be a genius for is based on 3% of his work. Newton was more than just a scientist. He spent most of his life doing alchemy and Bible studies. He was also appointed as the president of the Royal Society, which was a society for scientists and enlightened thinkers. Newton also spent part of his life working at the Royal Mint as the warden of the Royal Mint. It seems Isaac Newton will keep his mystery for more years to come. Thank you for watching me. If you like the video, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe our channel, and hit the notification bell to support us. See you later.